"Get off my porch, beggar," the saloon keeper growled, kicking at the woman hunched beneath the rail. His boot caught her ribs, not hard, but enough to rattle. She didn't cry out. Clara Belle pulled the shawl tighter around her shoulders, staggered to her feet, and shuffled down the splintered steps of the Laughing Jack. Dust clung to her hem. Blood bloomed in her gums as she clenched her jaw. Behind her, men laughed. One hollered, "Ain't no gold left in that widow's bones, boys. Let the buzzards pick what's left." She kept walking. Down the sun-choked main road of New Hope Valley, heat twisted in waves above the dirt. A cracked water trough leaned sideways. Horses swatted flies, watching her like they knew something. By the blacksmith's forge, Clara crouched in the shade, coughed dry, and folded herself into the crevice where chimney met wall. Her body hurt, all of it, but she'd slept in worse. The clang of the anvil, the hiss of steam, the stink of horses and coal and rust. They dulled her eyes until a voice broke through the haze. "You're her, ain't you?" Clara cracked one swollen lid. 6 girls stood before her, ragged and barefoot. Faces dirty, eyes sharp. They couldn't have been older than 12. The tallest had a slingshot. The smallest held a kitten wrapped in rags. The second tallest, freckles and a tear in her sleeve, spoke again. "You're the lady who lives in the fire hole." Clara coughed and looked away. "You want a home," said another. "And we want a mama like you." Clara let out a dry laugh. "Like me? You ain't scared of nobody," the freckled girl said. "You tripped Mr. Cobb when he grabbed Molly's braid. He near broke his face." "That was his bootlace," Clara muttered. "No, it wasn't." The littlest one grinned. Clara stood slow. "Y'all best find your own way. I've got nothing. You got 2 hands. And a knife." Clara's face shifted. "How you know about that?" The girl with the slingshot shrugged. "We seen it. Under your sleeve. The one with the crow feather on the hilt." That stopped Clara cold. "Go," she growled. But none of them moved. That night, she tried to sleep under the forge again. But the wind howled through the canyon, and something moved in the dark. A long shadow, heavy boots, a laugh she'd heard before. She sat up, fingers on the crow feather hilt. But nothing came. The next morning, the girls were back. This time they had bread. "Stolen?" Clara asked. "Borrowed," said the one with the freckles. "From the preacher's mule cart. He won't miss it." She tore the loaf in half. They ate in silence, crouched behind the barrel yard. Days passed. The girls followed her like stray dogs. She tried to lose them, vanished behind the livery, across the dry gulch, even spent a full day crouched in a cave up in Widow's Bluff. They found her before sundown. When she asked why, the smallest one said, "'Cause you're the only one who don't look at us like we're a stain." They started bringing her things. An old lantern, half a coil of rope, a chipped tin cup. Clara kept none of it, except the map, a ragged scrap with a crude drawing of a shack 2 miles west, past Dead Mule Hollow. "Used to be a miner's house," one said. "Burned up some. Still got walls, though. Maybe a roof." Clara didn't answer. But the next morning, before the town was up, she was walking the trail with 6 pairs of bare feet following behind. The shack leaned like it had been punched by God, but stood. The girls cleaned. Clara patched a window with burlap. They built a fire, and for the first time in weeks, she slept under a roof. By the 4th night, she was teaching them how to stack stones across the door, just in case. "Wolves?" one girl asked. Clara didn't answer. The 5th day, she saw him, Sheriff Dalton Briggs, leaning on the fence post at the edge of town, watching her, his hat low, his mustache thick as a broom. She met his gaze, didn't blink. He spat and walked away. She felt the weight of his eyes long after. That evening, Freckles crept up to her with a bundle. Found this near the fire hole. Inside, a faded red handkerchief, a knife, and a paper torn at the edges, yellow with age. A sketch of a woman, sharp eyes, wide brim hat, black duster. Below it read, "Clara Red Vulture Bell, dead or alive, $500. The fire crackled. "You killed men?" Freckles whispered. Clara didn't move. "You were a hunter." Clara's fingers touched the knife's handle. The crow feather was still tied tight. "I was a fool," she said. Silence. "But you saved Molly. You fixed Sadie's hand. You scared the preacher when he yelled at us." Clara looked at the 6 of them, huddled on the dirt floor, faces glowing in the firelight. "You ain't just nothing," said the smallest. "You're ours now." She opened her mouth, then closed it. The wind howled outside, rattling the patched window. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote cried. And Clara Belle, once feared, once forgotten, sat silent beside the fire, listening to 6 girls breathe steady in sleep. Tomorrow would come, and she wasn't running anymore. The thud of boots echoed off the canyon wall. Clara stopped sawing the plank mid-stroke. Her fingers tightened on the blade. 6 heads ducked behind the broken window of the shack, breath held. Sheriff Dalton Briggs stepped into the clearing, spurs clinking like ticking brass teeth. "You set to up house now, Miss Bell?" he asked, voice oily. "Word is, you've got yourself a little militia." Clara said nothing. Dust stirred around her boots. He shifted, hand resting on his revolver. Towns whispering, children playing with knives. Girls digging foxholes behind the old livery. "Ain't decent. They're digging to bury snakes," Clara replied, eyes on the plank. Briggs smiled. "Funny, how you always did attract the wild ones." He took a slow step closer. "I know who you were." Clara stood still. "But you ain't her anymore, are you?" "No," she said, and saw the flicker in his eyes. Disappointment. Maybe relief. He wanted her angry. He wanted to draw. Instead, she turned her back and picked up the saw again. He spat into the dust. "You keep feeding those little strays, and they'll turn wild on you." Clara didn't answer. She didn't look up when he walked away. Later, under the canyon's purple shadow, she taught the girls how to listen. "Not just hear, listen. Put your ear to the ground," she said. "The earth speaks when men lie." They obeyed. One heard a mule long before it came around the ridge. Another heard a rifle cocked behind the saloon before a man ever raised it. "Always keep your eyes soft, but your hands ready," she whispered. The girls practiced in silence, stacking stones for cover, sneaking like foxes from shadow to shadow. One night, Clara showed them how to shoot, just once. The echo cracked through the valley like thunder on bone. The smallest girl jumped. Clara knelt beside her and steadied her hands. "Again," she said, voice low, "don't be afraid of the noise. Be afraid of what happens if you freeze." By the end of the week, the townsfolk were staring, some with curiosity, some with disgust, but many with fear. In the general store, Clara stood silent while the girls placed coins on the counter for flour and matches. The clerk stared at them like they were holding snakes. "Where'd they get the money?" he muttered to a customer behind. The preacher called her out in the square that Sunday. "Children need Bibles, not bullets," he roared, sweat painting his collar dark. Clara watched from the edge of the crowd, arms crossed. The girls sat on the church steps, watching crows circle the steeple. "They need safety," Clara muttered. It was the smell that hit first. Burned leather, blood, smoke on the wind. Then came the thunder of hooves. The Black Tooth Gang. They rode in laughing, black scars across their faces, 6 in all. One held a bottle of fire. Another had a whip. They passed Clara's shack, tore down the fence the girls had built, trampled the coop they'd made from old barrels. A chicken screamed. Feathers flew. Clara didn't move, but her hand gripped the crow feather knife so tight her knuckles whitened. That night, they set fire to Old Man Ferris's barn. Shot his dog, just for barking. In the saloon, Briggs bought them around, sat with them, laughed at their jokes. The next morning, one of the girls, Sadie, came back with blood on her dress. She didn't speak, not until the fire was low and the others were asleep. "They took Rachel," she whispered, behind the feed house. Clara's face went hollow. She stared into the flames like they might burn away what she couldn't unsee. "She ain't moving right." Silence thickened. "I wanted to stop it," Sadie choked. Clara knelt, took her hand. "It's not your fault." The girl looked up. "You could have stopped it." The words cut deeper than any blade. That night, Clara sat alone under the stars. The shack behind her whispered with dreams and nightmares. Her fingers traced the old wanted poster, now nearly faded white. Clara, Red Vulture Bell, dead or alive. She folded it, looked out at the dark horizon. Behind her, footsteps. "You're not going to let him do that again," said Freckles, voice hard. Clara didn't turn. "You taught us to shoot, to hide, to listen. And what good did it do?" Clara rasped. "It saved me," said another voice. Molly stepped out of the shadows. "I used a trap you showed us. It cut that man's hand clean. They're afraid of you, Freckles said. We saw it. Even Briggs. Clara's eyes shimmered. The wind howled through the canyon like a warning. They should be, she whispered. At dawn, she walked into town with her knife at her belt and her red handkerchief tied tight around her neck. Every step cracked dry earth. Men paused mid-drag on their cigars. Women clutched shawls tighter. Even the dogs quieted. She walked into the sheriff's office. He leaned back in his chair, boots on the desk, hat low. Look who found her wings again, he said without looking. Clara dropped the red handkerchief on his desk like a war flag. I ain't his skin, she said. I'm tellin'. Get those boys out of this valley by tomorrow's dawn. Briggs looked up real slow, saw her eyes, and in that second, he remembered who she was. You'll start a war. Clara smiled. Just a little. I've ended worse. Screams cut through the dry morning like whip cracks. Clara dropped the water bucket and ran, boots pounding toward the smoke. By the time she reached the schoolhouse, flames were licking out through the windows. The bell swayed overhead, creaking like a warning. Two of the girls were still inside. Molly, Ruth. She didn't wait. Shoulder down, she charged through the warped door. Smoke clawed her throat. Fire snarled at her skirts. Here, a voice coughed from the corner. She found them beneath a collapsed beam, shielding each other with a coat. Clara hoisted it, fire biting her palms. The girls clung to her as they stumbled into the burning light. Behind them, the roof groaned and collapsed. Clara fell to her knees in the dirt, coughing soot. The girls were safe, crying but safe. Her hands were blistered, her shawl black with ash. No one came to help. Across the street, townsfolk stood watching, silent, arms crossed. Sheriff Briggs leaned against the post office with his arms folded, chewing on a matchstick. You let this happen, Clara rasped. He didn't flinch. You poked the hornets. Those girls could have died. You made it out, didn't you? The match snapped between her fingers. By evening, the canyon air turned cold. The girls sat around the fire, silent, eyes fixed on Clara's hands as she wrapped them in rags. They ain't gonna stop, are they? Asked Sadie. Clara said nothing. They burned the school, whispered Ruth. They hurt Rachel. And they laughed. They ain't scared of no law, Molly added. They're scared of you, said Freckles. Clara stared into the fire. Sparks drifted upward like dying stars. I buried who I was a long time ago, she murmured. But we dug her back up, said the smallest girl. Silence fell again. Then Clara stood. She crossed to the corner, pulled up a loose floorboard, and drew out a worn case wrapped in oilcloth. The girls watched as she opened it. Inside, a long-barreled Colt, black as night. Beside it, a faded duster and a coiled whip. Clara unwrapped the gun and checked the cylinder. 6 chambers. Empty. She began to load them, one bullet at a time. When I wore this gun, she said, I was death on horseback. No one called me mother then. You could be both, Freckles said, voice steady. We need you to be both. Clara looked at them, 6 pairs of eyes staring like candles in the dark. She tied the red handkerchief around her throat. At midnight, she left the shack and walked into the hills. The canyon wind tore at her coat. Her boots crunched over gravel and shale. Coyotes howled in the distance. She knelt by a flat stone under a gnarled mesquite tree and whispered, I told you I'd never pick up that gun again. I lied. The wind answered with silence. She placed a kiss on the stone and stood. At dawn, the preacher's bell rang once. Clara rode into town on a borrowed mare. No saddle, no smile. Her duster flared behind her like wings of dust. The 6 girls trailed behind her, silent as shadows. Each carried something, a rope, a bundle of nails, a coil of wire, a length of timber. The townsfolk stared from behind curtains and barrels. Clara tethered the horse in front of the saloon. Inside, the Black-Tooth gang slouched at their table, half drunk and laughing. Deke Rollins, their leader, sat at the center, face half-burned, eyes like black marbles. He looked up, smirked. Well, the little bird returns. Clara stepped forward. You've got till sundown to ride out of this valley. Rollins raised his glass. Or what? She didn't answer, just turned and walked out. Outside, she whispered to the girls. Every trap I ever taught you. Every trick I ever showed. We said it now. They nodded and vanished into alleys and behind sheds. The town became a maze. Loose boards replaced with pitfall covers. Tripwires hidden under dirt. Lantern oil poured in alleys. Shotgun rigs wired to fence posts. The Black Tooth Gang watched from the saloon porch, laughing. "They're playing war," one said. Rollins just stared at the red scrap tied to the church's bell rope. That night, Clara sat at the edge of town, sharpening her knife in the firelight. The girls huddled nearby, exhausted but awake. "She's coming back," Sadie whispered. "The Red Vulture," said Ruth. "She never left," Clara muttered. Behind them, the canyon wind howled, cold and sharp as a blade. The first shot rang out just before sunbreak. It wasn't Clara's. It came from the roof of the general store, where a drunk Black-Tooth scout slumped backward, blood leaking from a hole between his eyes. Freckles lowered the rifle, jaw clenched tight. Then silence. Then chaos. Rollins burst out of the saloon with 2 men at his flanks, shouting, "Get to the horses!" He didn't make it 5 steps. A rope snapped tight around his legs, yanked from behind a barrel by Ruth. He hit the dirt hard. Gun gone. Nose bleeding. 2 of his men spun and fired wild. One triggered the wire Molly had strung across the livery gate. A shotgun rig exploded from the rafters. He went down screaming. Clara moved through the dust like a storm. Black duster snapping, red handkerchief burning at her throat. Her Colt barked once, twice. 2 more gang members fell before their guns cleared leather. Rollins scrambled to his feet, limping, cursing. "She's just one woman." Clara's voice came low, cold. You never understood what that meant. He ran. Smoke drifted between buildings. The sun crawled over the canyon rim, bathing everything in blood-red gold. Clara walked through the rising dust like a ghost returned. Another gang member popped up from behind a water trough. A sharp was cut through the air. Sadie's slingshot slammed a rock straight into his temple. He dropped. Briggs stepped out from the jailhouse, gun raised. "Clara," he barked. "This is murder." She turned slowly. "You had your chance," she said. "You made your choice." He didn't lower the gun, but his hand shook. She stepped closer. "Gonna shoot me now, Sheriff?" Her voice didn't rise, didn't tremble. "I should have done it years ago. You should have done a lot of things." Briggs looked past her, saw 6 girls standing in the street behind crates and barrels, weapons in hand, faces grim. He lowered his gun and stepped aside. Rollins made it to the church. He kicked in the door, turned, breathing hard. Empty chamber. No rounds left. He reached for the knife in his boot, but Clara was already inside. The stained glass light painted her in reds and golds, like some outlaw angel of reckoning. Rollins backed up the aisle, blood dripping from his lip. "You ain't law," he spat. "You're just a killer." "I was." She kept coming. "You think they'll thank you?" He gestured toward the windows. "You think they'll call you Mama after this?" "No," she said, then paused. "But they'll still have a home." He lunged. She moved faster. The cold cracked once. Rollins dropped, face first under the pulpit. Later, townsfolk crept into the square. Silence fell. 6 girls stood in a line, watching smoke drift from the windows of the saloon. Clara sat on the church steps, coat draped over her lap, hands burned and bandaged. The Colt rested across her knees. Briggs approached slow. "What now?" he asked. Clara didn't look at him. "You rebuild. And you." She stood, walked past him, untied the red handkerchief from her neck, and nailed it to the church door with her knife. "Keep it," she said, as warning, or memory. He watched her go, the girls falling in behind her one by one. Freckles glanced back once. "She ain't just our mama," she said. "She's legend." Epilogue, part of Section 4. An old man leans on a cane, voice gravel rough. They say she vanished into the desert that night. Left the girls a shack, a rifle, and everything she knew about staying alive. He chuckles. Some folks say she rides still, out in the red canyons where law don't reach. Others say she laid down her gun for good. A child asks, was she real? He looks up, smiles slow. She was more than real. He nods toward the red scrap of cloth hanging in a frame behind the bar. She was the Red Vulture, and 6 girls called her Mama.